I decided to do a mini deep dive on Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers because I've seen a lot of weird, incorrect, just simply incorrect discourse on this album, saying it's one of Kendrick's worst, or it aged poorly, or like it was never good, and blah 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 blah. Let's be honest here. The only reason why any of y'all will ever think that is because you're a Drake dick rider. So I'm gonna go into depth on. Let me see how many songs I have. 3 of them on here. Yep, 3 songs on here. We gonna do a quick little deep dive, starting off with United and Grief. United and Grief is the first song off of Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, and it starts off with the big thing that's on everybody's mind during this time, the time off he had between this album and his last one. The exact line is 1,855 days I've been going through something. And it lets you think about what this album may be about. Me personally, when I first heard this, I was thinking, okay, at this point Kendrick had only made concept albums, things like GNX and stuff weren't out. He's coming off of doing the Black Panther stuff, and he had little features here and there. Like he had that little background feature on the Dreamers album for Dreamville, but he really wasn't making any appearances anywhere else. So I was genuinely intrigued about what he was speaking about. And the song starts off kind of chaotic, you know? And that's kind of how like a lot of the songs start off here, because I feel like this is one of his more like raw emotional albums, but it starts off very chaotic. He speaks about how he got a therapist to speak about how he fundamentally feels and like how to understand it all the way and like understand why he made the decisions that he makes. He also speaks on, in 2015, buying new cars, jewelry, and things like that. The reason why I know it's 2015 is because he was 28 years old, and that was in 2015. And he talks about how it was kind of performative, or it was even like flexing, even though he had no intention of showing anybody. He was still flexing, and he speaks about how like high his taxes were at the time and things like that. And I personally think that he was more so saying like, I was making poor decisions just because I had the money, and I was trying to make it like obvious that I had the money. Like he was basically saying he was flexing, and a good way to show like flexing without even like really flexing. And a good line for that is where he says 500 in jewelry, chain was magic, never wore it in public, late reaction. So he's saying like he never wore this chain, but he spent $500,000 on it. So like thinking about that, you're like, wow, Kendrick Lamar, even during that time, because this is around the time when T-Pab came out, and he was like, oh, I have money, I'm like notable, I can spend it however I want to spend it, I'm doing this, doing that. So he was flexing and indulging in shit that you wouldn't really expect him to indulge in, especially during that time period. The way that people viewed Kendrick Lamar, it was like, oh, he's like one of them rappers who's like above, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to really explain it, but it was very, very surprising. But then he begins to speak on why he is indulging with these things, because after every time he speaks on his indulgements or things like that, I'll speak on another one very soon, he says, I grieve different. So he's speaking on grief. I'm not going to go into details of what type of grief, but it's pretty obvious that he's not speaking on one singular person or like occasion of grief. He's speaking more so on things that have affected him in his life. So like, for example, he speaks on the possible cheating incident on the very next verse. He says that he met a girl in Chicago during his first tour, and she was speaking about it. I believe he mentioned that she has green eyes, things like that. And the way that he was grieving a lot of the things that he went through in life was emotionally in general, is just like sexually. He's spoken about it a lot on this album. He had a lot of issues sexually where he was infidelitous. He was going around having sex with a lot of different women behind his partner's back at the time. He speaks about this a lot, but like one real definitive like part, like mentioning of grief that he talks about within his music, is on To Pimp a Butterfly, within the song You. The entire song is basically him berating himself and yelling at himself for not being there for a friend who died in the hospital after a surgery, and feeling like he didn't do enough and failed genuinely. One of the biggest themes of it, and like one of like the bigger like surprisingly memes, and I like, this is a problem I have with music in general. I do understand that the scream is funny, but for some reason when it comes to like people of color and like their music, it gets memed way more than other people, and it's probably them talking about pain. Like 12 Stout Street, that was like a very heavily memed song, and it's very much about like pain and like things that he went through during his life. But that really only happens to people of color or like rap music. But that's besides the point. That's a different video. But he's he speaks about that very candidly on You, how he feels like he failed and he didn't do enough for his friend who was in the hospital and happened to pass away from a surgery. And he was like, he was basically having a temper tantrum in his hotel room, getting drunk, losing his mind, and genuinely feeling like he failed. And then after this, he speaks about his cousin, Baby Keem, buying 4 cars in 4 months, feeling like he's seeing some of himself and his mistakes within his cousin, who was growing in fame and popularity at the time. Because 2022, this was, I believe this is a year before or like a year after, or it might maybe even the same year that Melodic Blue came out, and Baby Keem was like at his height of like popularity and things like that. And like, this song is basically Kendrick gearing you up for the theme of the album. He's telling you, I'm here to address all of my faults, all of my wrongs, and like, regardless of how uncomfortable and awkward it may become, you are going to feel what I am saying to you, and you are going to see what the 7 years with me gone has done. Count Me Out is the beginning of the Mr. Morale side of the album, and is possibly the best song on the album, and it's my personal favorite, to be honest. It starts off with vulnerability from the top, as K-Dot continues to talk about wanting to right his wrongs at one point of his life, regardless to if it's like this life or a separate life, and all these like thinking about all of his mentions of guilt, pain, shame, all pulling on him and tugging on him, like making him struggle to like evolve as a man and grow, and it's making him feel like there are 6 guns pointed at him at the same time, and nothing is really helping him, and nothing in his life is helping him feel better, as he mentions on the next bar where he says, done every magazine what's fame to me. So like, all of it is like numb to him at this point, like being famous, being popular, he doesn't really care about that, so that's not really helping his mentor or helping him become a better man at this point. And it's just like, he's speaking on how like money and time, without truly fixing or addressing what happened to you, or like how you've become the man that you are or growing from the man that you are, really doesn't change anything. And he also continues to speak on how he's beaten himself up with guilt and shame over things that he shouldn't feel guilty for, which I will bring up on the next song. If you don't know what the next song is, I'm very, very confused for you, but you're gonna know when this is up. But he continues to speak on how he feels beat up about past things, that he's broken down from it all, and he was struggling to bring it back up at one point. And then one of the most important, and I mean this with all certainty here, one of the most important things said on the album is that he decides to finally trust himself and not allow other factors to make him coy or nervous or like just like fearful of failure. He's just going to allow himself to be him. And he also says that if he loses everything, it doesn't matter, because he's remaining who he is as a man, and he's not hiding behind his faults and failures, cowering in front of his wrongs. He is going at them and growing from them. So if he becomes a man that other people don't like, it doesn't matter to him, because he is who he wants to be. He continues to speak on how people wear a mask until it's time to truly face their wrongs, and then everybody is vulnerable and like their ego and pride are exposed, and they feel fear, and they instantly want to fight back or back off, or like, I don't know how to explain it right now with words, but I'd say more so like, instead of like back off, they more so want to combat it and like not really address it. They want to be they want to feel like what they did wasn't as bad as what it was, when in reality it is molding who they are in their mind. And then Kendrick speaks on how he had to destroy that version of himself where ego and pride and all those things control him, so he can actually become the man that he is, and he had to regain himself regardless of the fears that he saw within himself, as he said in the line where he said, Amityville, I ain't seen nothing scarier, because when he looked in that mirror and he saw the man who was scared and deprived and didn't really know how to like be him, he was scared, but he fought past that version of himself throughout this 7-year hiatus that he spoke on in the song before. He's really trying to become a better man. After that, he continues, he says 4 times in a row, I love when you count me out. And I don't personally take this as him saying to other people that he loves it when they count him out. I think he's speaking more so on himself, like how he's counted himself out in multiple occasions and actually stopped believing in himself. And he was just like, I love when you count me out, because once he counts himself out, he really takes some time out and then finds himself more and then regains himself, becoming the truly best version of himself. He can't allow himself to fall or falter or just be okay with not even just like being okay with being okay, that was bad. You have to be okay with saying that was bad. This is why it's bad. This is why I did it, and this is why I won't do it again. And that's the whole basis of this entire album. There's a lot of like different instances on it. Like I saw at the time, a lot of people didn't like the inclusion of a song like Auntie Diaries, where he's speaking about his aunt who is a transsexual woman, and she the relationship he has with her, and like how his relationship with religion, and how it like he decided to pick humanity instead of like go on and fully hate someone that he loves in his life due to that. And how he was like, there's a line in that song where he's speaking, basically saying like, I said these hateful things, but I didn't have hateful intent behind them. And then she said, regardless of the intent, it still is the word, and the word, like the intent is buried within the word. And one of the examples she used is when he brought a white fan on stage, and she said the N-word, and he took her off stage. Obviously that fan didn't have negative intent, but you don't want a white person on stage saying the N-word openly, because it is, the intent is buried within that word of hatred and bigotry and things like that. So that allowed Kendrick to understand that, like, regardless of your intent with that word, it is not a good word to have spread around or promote, because of the amount of things that could happen to the people that are that due to you like promoting that type of shit. But yeah, this is him. Count Me Out is just him really growing. That's the biggest thing. It's him growing, realizing his wrongs, not running from his fears of himself anymore, and actually becoming who he wants to be. Possibly one of the most emotionally deep cuts of the album, Mother I Sober, begins with Kendrick speaking about how he feels everything and how sensitive his emotions truly are, regardless to how tough on the exterior he may try to seem. He also speaks on when somebody within his family, I wouldn't want to assume, so I'm not going to say who it was, put their hands on his mother when he was 5 years old, and how he feels about his reaction to not retaliate, and he froze up, even though he was a 5-year-old child, and he blames himself for that time. And it's like something that gnaws on him even to this day at the age of, I believe he was 35 when he made this album. So for something to happen during that time in like 1992, and for like it to be over 30 years later and he still thinks about it and it gnaws on his mind, and he still has the images of his mother being hurt and abused by this person, and him feeling like he didn't do enough and feeling guilty, it shows how no matter how long something is, the wounds never heal unless you truly address it. Up next, he speaks about his grandmother and grieving the loss of her, feeling her presence throughout his life, and feeling how his grief led him to pain and like drinking and doing drugs, so he can avoid feeling it all at once and addressing it all. And that's one big theme of this. Is like grief is such a hard thing to bear when you're not truly ready to, or when you're trying to avoid the grief and you're like drinking, you're trying to stay away from it all, just trying to seem like everything's okay in your mind when it's not. And the pain when it was sober was sometimes too hard to bear. I spoke about it before with the T-Bab song You, where he was talking about drinking in his hotel room, and one of the big lines from that is and if I told your secrets, one should know money don't stop a suicidal weakness, where he's speaking about how no matter how much money Kendrick Lamar has gotten, or like no matter how much fame or notoriety he has, the money and all that stuff does not stop him from feeling those emotions he feels, and like hating himself and like berating his past. Another thing, and this is when it gets very sensitive, I know a lot of people might have dealt with something like this. If you have and you feel uncomfortable listening to this part, it's completely understandable. I'm not mad at you if you turned it off here, but he speaks about when at the age of 7 years old, his family thought his cousin was sexually assaulting him, or like sexually abusing him in any sort of way. The truth was, and Kendrick reiterates it multiple times in the song, but the cousin didn't touch him, but they didn't believe him. And at this time, he didn't understand, and it began to gnaw at his memories in his mind a bit at a young age, because he hears so many people not believe him. He starts to think that he's wrong, because he's a young man, doesn't really know himself, and doesn't really know what they might think happened. So he thinks that he might have like forgotten something, or like lost a part of himself and things like that, where he's not able to really identify if he was if that was done to him, even though he clearly remembers that nothing like that was done to him. And a lot of that stuff happens to people who were sexually assaulted in the opposite way, though, where like they were young and their memories block, and like their mind blocks off the memories of them being sexually touched or assaulted by a family member because they want to protect that young person. Like, your mind is always trying to protect you. So whenever you think of those things, it tends to block them off, or whenever things like that happens, they get blocked off. So like, it's completely understandable for like them to not believe him, but also he doesn't know why they don't believe him, because there's even a step beyond that for why. And he uses other coping mechanisms at this time. Like when he was younger, of course, he wasn't doing like drugs and things like that. So he was making music even at a young age just to cope and to stop his mind from really eating at him and things like that. But the reason why his family did not believe him, as we learned later in the song, is because his mother was sexually assaulted in Chicago. And this song was brought up recently in a very weird light, I will say. And one thing I will say for sure is like, honestly, I'm not even saying this in like some sensitive you a bit, bro. Bringing this up in the way that it was brought up was disgusting, and I'm not gonna go into more detail about it because I don't even want to be honest. But his mother always like believed that because of like things that happened to her, she didn't want any of that to happen to Kendrick at his young age. So regardless to what he said, she was never going to believe it, because she always was on her toes and believed that it happened to him. And it led to a lot of relationships being cut off. Like, I don't know for sure if they're like that cousin is still within Kendrick's life, but what I can say is, off of like what I'm seeing, there's absolutely no way. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I can't say. And then he brings back what he spoke about at the beginning of the song, where he was like, he spoke about how his mother was assaulted and beat up in front of him, and his uncle said that he got revenge for what happened, and the image of his mom's face, black and blue, continues to haunt Kendrick to this day, causing him to struggle to even look at her in her eyes. And that's like another callback to what I said before, where things in your past, regardless of how long it's been, you're still the same person. So even no matter how long it's been, the person that you are is still there, and you still have to recognize that you have to move past it. No matter if it's been over a long time, your brain is still grieving or like dealing with that pain, because you never really dealt with it. You never really had the demon cast away from you. And another thing that Kendrick deals with due to this is infidelity, because he doesn't really trust anybody at this point of his life. He cheats on his partner Whitney, who he's spoken about before on multiple different occasions as the love of his life. It's his teenage sweetheart. You know, they've been together since they were in high school. He's cheated on her multiple times, and he caught her in the kitchen praying to God, thinking that she did something wrong, and she blames herself for what he's done. And she asked him if it was a problem, his like sexual like depravity in the way that he continues to cheat on her and have sex with other women. He lies and said he didn't have issues, and she recommended him therapy. And when I hear that part, I feel like he's insinuating that she knew that he was lying, because she knew that he had a problem with cheating and like just overall emotional intelligence and being able to do anything like emotional in that level. So she's told him to go on this therapy run during the 7-year hiatus. And of course, this is when he has this conversation with his mother, where she confesses to him that she was touched in Chicago during this time. And like, no matter his answer, she would have never believed him. And he also speaks on, during the 7-year hiatus, he was touring, basically what he says. He was touring around the world to really find himself, and how this separation from his family made him feel, because he wasn't with Whitney at the time. So the separation from his family made him feel like disgusting, and like made him feel grief. And he continued to blame himself for all the things that he's dealt with in his life. And it's just a very, very, very like torturous song. But it ends with the message that he speaks about, which and Kendrick comes and says something that I genuinely agree with, where he says that slavery and like the disgusting things that people during those times was forced to watch caused a lot of mental issues within the black community and people of color in general, when it comes to how they were raised, because their like great grandfather that was a part of it let his pain possibly take over, and then your great grandfather passed it on to your grandfather, passed it on to your father, and 9 times out of 10, those type of ideologies, whether or not they're right, stick because of the mental trauma that you deal with growing up. And that's why it's called generational trauma. And that's why you can't just dismiss slavery and be like, oh, it was so long ago, when in reality, number one, not really that long ago, and number two, we see how it currently still mentally fucks with how the community is and how the community functions. And like, it's ignorant to just try to marginalize race like slavery to being like, oh, you weren't a part of it, so you don't know how it was. Obviously, we don't know how it was, but it obviously still affects the community on a high level. And that's what Kendrick is speaking on at this point. And another thing that he says is he will no longer allow himself to continue that cycle. So he's freeing himself from it. He frees his mother from that. He frees his cousin from it. He frees Whitney from it in this, and he frees his children from it. So at the end of the song, I believe it is Whitney. I will say it's her because the kids are also in the ending. She says, "You did it. I'm proud of you. You broke the generational curse." Implying that he was speaking on what I just said, the generational curse that people of color have dealt with due to slavery and what they've seen with their own eyes and things like that. So it's not him saying, oh, I'm not responsible. It's him saying, I understand why I was raised this way and why my father and my father's father was raised this way, and what I'm going to do now to prevent that. And that's the whole essence of this song and this album. And this little ending part with his family saying thank you is an amazing part and an amazing ending to an amazing album and an amazing story overall that Kendrick Lamar made, man. To be honest with y'all, I don't understand why Miss Around the Big Steppers is such an overhated album. I understand that comprehension is such a like low thing in rap right now, but like that's for a different video. But like still, the ability that he had to be able to like talk to you step by step about how generational trauma within people of color and black people leads to like mental health issues that are never addressed because of like the taboo that mental health is within the black community. And like he's able to get these messages through in palatable and frankly uncomfortable versions like Auntie Diaries and things like that. But he actually wants you to feel uncomfortable because the topic of mental health is meant to be uncomfortable regardless to how you may feel about it. He doesn't want you to like, he doesn't want to let you off easy in this album. He wants you to truly understand, listen, I dealt with all this. I see why I dealt with all this. I'm going to tell you what I did wrong, how I found out I did it wrong, and how I'm going to rectify it. And me rectifying it isn't just me hiding, saying, oh, I'm doing better. It's me showing you how I'm doing better. And that's why I love this album. One of my favorites. I did this little tier list. A video I didn't get to drop because the mic quality was bad, unfortunately. But it won as my favorite album of the 2020s because of just how pure and raw it is, while showing its intentions very well, keeping it very concise and composed perfectly. There are some mistakes I would say on it. I would not have personally put Kodak Black on an album after what he's done to people and like the amount of like hurt he's given women. But I also do kind of see why he's trying to show how somebody could go wrong being raised by that and like being stuck in that generational curse, that generational trauma that he was stuck in. I'm really sad that a lot of people didn't understand this album or didn't really give this album a chance, because this genuinely could have helped a lot of people mentally and helped a lot of people truly understand why they feel the way they do, or why they act the way they do, or why their emotions go the way that they go. Because everyone who has somebody who's dealt with that is still dealing with that. You can't come on here lying saying that it's not a generational curse, because it is. I'm sorry, it is. But I'm getting yappy. This was about Missing Around the Big Steppers. Just a few songs off that one. Thank y'all and peace.